Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and much appreciated you guys checking today's video out. And I got a video I've been wanting to do for a while. We're going to talk about how old tournament fishermen, old bass fishermen just sort of fade away. And we've touched upon this a little bit, but I've got some stuff that I've never brought up here before. I want to talk about and have a discussion on this. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation here. And real quick, guys, just want to remind everybody, give you guys the weekly reminder about our summer Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns. We've got our summer maps on the website at fishthemoment.com. I'll include the lake map breakdown in the description. If you guys are looking for some great spots on your favorite lake to fish this summer, this is a great resource for it. And also, if we don't have a lake on the website you're looking for, you can book a virtual lesson with me to go over any lake in the country, regardless how big or small it is. So again, Fish the Moment breakdown link in the description here. Much appreciated. Okay, guys, one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is I was looking through the Elite Series, the Bassmaster Elite Series point standings, Angler of the Year standings a couple days ago, and I noticed Rick Clunn, Larry Nixon, David Fritz, and a couple of the other old-timers are all down like in 100th place in the point standings. You know, there's only like 103 or 4 people in the tournament, and they're like all at the bottom of the list. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I looked at like the top 10 guys in the top 10 of the Angler of the Year. Guys, I didn't even know half of them. I've never even heard of half of these dudes, and they're in top 10 of Angler of the Year. And freaking hammers like, you know, Fritz and Nixon and Clunn are down at the bottom of the pack. And I found this, it was sort of surreal a little bit, because back when, you know, I was at the top of my game fishing and everything, and you know, fishing super heavy, fishing everything back in the 90s, those dudes were unbeatable. I mean, the Clunn and Nixon and Fritz, they were winning Angler of the Years and classics and top 10s every tournament. And to see them now at the bottom of the pile, I've got some mixed, you know, thoughts about this, because I understand, but at the same time, I don't understand it, how it happens, because it happens to me too. I don't separate myself from this. It's like, we've talked about this before. It's like when anglers hit 50 years old, every single angler starts going downhill. Every one of them, including Van Dam, Brower, Biffle, Gary Klein, everyone. It's like when you hit 50 years old, you just start not catching as many fish, and you start sucking more in tournaments, and it gets worse and worse as you get older. And there's a couple different thoughts I have on this. So first of all, it's like from an intellectual, logical standpoint, it doesn't make any sense, because you think that, you know, the more years you have experience fishing, you know, the better you're going to get all the time. It's like you don't really have the physical the age limitations in fishing. You know, experience is super important, but nevertheless, you have a lot of the younger guys out there that you've never heard of, that they've got maybe 10 seasons underneath their belt of fish movement and fish behavior, versus having 50 or 60 years, yet they're kicking butt. So I can understand that in other physical sports, like, you know, football and basketball and that type of stuff, where there is a physical limitation, but you really don't have that in bass fishing. It's like I've talked about this before. It's like I'm in better, you know, in my own opinion, in my own situation here, I'm in better physical shape than I've ever been. I mean, I can bench press and squat more weight than I've ever have. I can run faster. The only physical thing that I've, you know, noticed the change in is my close-up eyesight. I have to have reading glasses, and I have since I was about 45. But other than that, I don't have any energy loss. It's not like I get tired in the boat. I can fish daylight till dark, standing up, and don't get tired. So from that standpoint, you don't have the obvious, what you think would be the physical limitation, and you got more experience. It's like, so I'm in better shape now. I've got more years under my belt, yet your performance goes downhill. So there's other variables at play there. And you know, we've talked about this before. The variables are imagination and creativity and passion, and, you know, lack of distractions, all that type of stuff are obviously more important with it. and you get locked into certain things. It's like you've after you've had, let's take Rick Clunn for example. Rick's always arguably one of the greatest fishermen of the top three in the history of the sport, and Rick has had so much success on what he likes to do over the past years. It's like it's extremely difficult when you've won millions of dollars in major tournaments. It's very difficult to put aside everything that works for you and completely reinvent yourself as an angler. And I think that's ultimately what it is, because Larry Nixon's known as a worm fisherman, David's a cranker, Rick's shallow water power fisherman. And then you see a lot of the guys now that dominate the sport that, they're electronic experts. They can do anything. It's like they're super versatile. I mean, they just sort of kicked it up to the next level as far as that goes. So there's obviously that part of fishing is more critical than experience, and I had a hard time accepting that. Even back when I was younger, I always had the anticipation. It's like when you got older, you're going to get better and better and better, and by the time you're 60 or 70 years old, you're pretty much going to be unbeatable. It doesn't work that way. So I think that's something that every single angler out there has to struggle with a little bit. And I think one of the reasons that old tournament anglers sort of just fade away is that none of them want to just give it up. But there's very few guys out there that just can say, I'm done, I've had enough of it. I mean, Hank Parker is one of the few guys. He quit at the top of his game. Van Dam has said he's getting ready to quit. Whether he comes back or not remains to be seen. But for the most part, that once you've done it for so many years, it's just hard to give it up, because in your mind and in your internal being, you don't realize that you're 60, 70, 75 years old. The only time that you know that is when you look in the mirror, but your mind and your inner self does not see yourself like that. So, and that happens to everybody. That's inevitable with anybody. It's like, look at Brandon Polinick. Like now, Brandon Polinick is one if not the top angler in the year in the country. Jacob Wheeler, Brandon Polinick, those Dustin Canal, those guys, but their time's limited. Their time is rapidly coming to an end, because when those guys hit 50 years old, they're not going to be immune to what happened to Clunn and Van Dam and Brower and Nixon and all that. They're going to have the same thing. So I guess that's just a fact of life. And I think that one of the things we have to do that's very difficult as you age as a fisherman is you have to accept that fact, and you have to enjoy it for how it evolves with your age, because it's frustrating not to do as well because you don't understand it. You don't really understand why your performance and your catches go down, because you're doing everything that was successful for you in the past and for decades and decades, and all of a sudden it doesn't work as good. But I think the sooner people realize that that's the way it should be, man. That's the cycle of life. That's the part of life. That's handing it off to the next generation. And one of the things about one of the realities of life is that each generation should be better than the last. It's like, it doesn't matter what it is. And we can use fishing as an example, but the generation, when my generation in fishing, like in my heyday, it was in the 90s. I was at the top of my game in the 90s, and guys that were at the top of their game like myself in the 90s were better than the guys in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And guys that are at the top of their game now, they're better than the guys that were in the 2010s. And that's just the way it is. I mean, that's all is right with the world when it's like that. So anyway, I just find it's sort of like a bittersweet thing. I find it's taken me a long time to come to terms with seeing guys like Clunn and Brower and Nixon and Biffle and Roland Martin and all the superstars. It's difficult to see them not performing well, because I know how much experience and I know how much knowledge and I know how much they know about bass fishing that doesn't equate into success. It's like it's an odd paradox that we find ourselves in here. So anyway, it's like just an observation I wanted to pass along there. I was thinking about that when I saw that list down there. I'm so used to like it when my mind is like yesterday. I remember looking at the Bassmaster Angler of the Year points list in the 90s, and every year the top 10, Fritz, Nixon, Clun, every single year without exception. And it's not like that anymore. It's like I look through the list now and it's like, I've never heard of this dude. I don't know who that guy is. How did he qualify for the elites? It's it's really a weird experience there a little bit. So anyway, guys, just a few thoughts on that. I hope you guys are having a good day, and we'll see y'all later.